Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special live Facebook forum, Making the Grade Stop Bullying. I'm Michelle Edmonds, and I want to take a moment to introduce our panel of experts who you will be able to connect with over the next hour as we dive into this incredibly important topic to all of us. First, let me start with State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Sherry Ibarra. Superintendent Ibarra has been leading a statewide campaign to stop bullying in our schools. Seated next to her, you may recognize this face. Delphia Lloyd is a senior at Caldwell High School. Delphia is also the chairwoman of the Caldwell Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. It's a group who's speaking out on bullying. Over here on my other side, next, Officer David Gomez from the Meridian Police Department. During the day, you will find Officer Gomez at Mountain View High School as a school resource officer. He's made social media and the internet kind of his specialty in connecting with and protecting with teens, as you can understand he would. And also joining us, Dr. Ida Midget. She is the Associate Professor and Interim Chair in the Department of Counselor Education at Boise State. Dr. Midget's line of research is in bullying intervention in K through 12 schools. Everyone, thank you for being here. Welcome to the Six on Your Side studios and our live Facebook page. Well, here's where it happens, right here on Facebook. For the next hour, we want to engage in a frank discussion about how to stop bullying. We are live here on Facebook because, as we all know, Delphia included, much of the bullying of our children today happens here on the social media platforms. The Six on Your Side team will be monitoring your questions and comments during our live forum. We want you to ask questions, to respond, to give your comments. The goal here is to start the conversation, but also to help you take action and make sure that you know what's happening in your schools with stopping bullying. So panel, I think a good place to start for all of us is to maybe define bullying. That word is thrown out there so much these days. Officer Gomez, I know that you particularly have a kind of definition that you cling to even when parents call you up and say, my kid's being bullied. So what is bullying?
Okay, so bullying by our definition that we use at the Meridian Police Department, repeated one-way harassment in any way, shape, or form. Whether it's third party, whether it's online, whether it's in person, it has to be repeated and it has to be one way. As soon as a child participates in a two-way conversation, it becomes social conflict, which is no longer bullying. And that's where a lot of parents have a hard time understanding that, hey, your child's involved in social conflict, it's not bullying. And a bit of social conflict resolution, learning how to do that in high school is an excellent place to learn because social conflict's going to
happens everywhere. Right? So do we agree with that statement that it has to be one way? Anybody else have a better definition for it? Is it difficult maybe for parents and educators, Superintendent Ibarra, because bullying to one kid, even though it's one way, there are different tolerance levels, right? I mean, one kid can handle this much being picked on, while another kid can't deal with just one comment or two comments. So how do you deal with that in the educational world?
You know, to add to the officer's definition, I think when we're talking to really small children, we often talk about unwanted attention that is one-sided, that makes them feel uncomfortable, lowers their self-esteem, anything that it could also involve any sort of physical contact as well. So I would add just a little bit to that definition in that realm. And then also when we're I think parents are a huge part of that you just brought up, is really making sure that the message gets out there, that you have a conversation about that with your child. And also, one incident that I remember in particular is being contacted as a parent. I want to be involved when something is going on so that I can have that conversation with my child about what's going on at school. So just to take it one step further, like I said earlier, it's parental involvement. I would just add that, and it's also deals with, when you're dealing with small children, is any unwanted contact that makes you feel uncomfortable, and just having that conversation about what that looks like.
Delphia, you and I have talked about Twitter wars, you know, and kids these days get into these wars, whether they be on Facebook here or Twitter. When does it go to harassment for you? When, and in your own personal experience, you've been bullied?
For me, the reason why I don't have Twitter and other social media accounts is because of the danger of bullying and other kinds of harassment. My parents and I have discussed this matter, and we know for me a safe zone is to not have certain kinds of social media, such as Twitter, Snapchat, any other kinds. But I've seen my friends get involved, and on the social media I've seen people get involved with each other where it becomes bullying at the point when you can no longer take into account the other person's feelings. When someone asks you to stop, or when they are obviously offended but you keep going, as Officer said, repeated harassment, that's when it becomes bullying. You have to remember to take into account you are not the only one on this side. If something they did upsets you, that does not necessarily give you the right to upset them back. And that's when social conflict comes into play as well.
Dr. Midget, you have done so much research on this topic. In fact, your line of work is looking at intervention in K through 12 schools and bullying. How do you start the conversation in the schools? How do you make sure educators know when the line is crossed? Because it is fuzzy.
Right. And, you know, before I get to your question, I guess the only thing that I would add from the literature in bullying is that oftentimes it's recognized that sometimes one incident alone, if it's powerful enough, it compromises somebody's safety, could be considered bullying. So for example, if somebody's thrown in front of a car, that one incident is traumatizing and can be considered bullying. So in terms of the intervention work that we do working with schools, we focus on training students, and we've worked with elementary, middle school, junior high school, and high school students. And we teach students, when they see bullying at school, we teach them intervention strategies in terms of what they should do. So when I talk to schools or talk to parents about engaging their children in these interventions, I say that the definition of bullying is something that's very important at the administrative level for the adults at school to understand and make decisions with. But when we train students to intervene, they don't need to understand what the definition is. They need to know what to do when they see something happen that's not okay. So
I think those are all very appropriate definitions. And the word, I think, has gotten watered down so much of the time. And Delphia, this doesn't necessarily apply to you, but in our day and age, and I'm speaking to parents right now, we didn't have these devices. We didn't walk around with, you know, little tiny devices in our back pocket. How has technology changed bullying? Officer Gomez?
Technology has changed bullying because you have the masses to account for, right? Whereas before you just had your own circle of friends or schoolmates that's who's going to bully you, maybe a neighbor kid, somebody, you know, in your own neighborhood. Now you have the whole world available, and I have parents who call me and, hey, somebody in Australia is bullying my kid.
Truthfully.
Truthfully, and it's like, okay, you know, block them, delete them.
Right.
Right, and then I get the parents who say, well, then I won't be able to see what they're saying. Like, okay, we're good with that.
Interesting.
Right? But we get lots of that where, I mean, the whole world can be a bully. And, you know, truthfully, some of the kids have, in middle school, already have up to 5,000 Facebook friends. I can stop a bully today, you know, as a police officer or as a school administrator, we can stop bullying today. If you have 5,000 friends, there's going to be 10 more people lined up tomorrow to bully your child.
One of the things that Officer Gomez does, which I really appreciate, is that he teaches an internet safety class, and you're going to be able to find that on our 6onyourside.com page. Amazing class, and one of the key pieces of information, we're going to talk about this coming up tonight at 10 o'clock on the news, is you have a great piece of advice for parents about how many friends, if kids are using a social media application, how many friends should a child have?
For any given single application should be 200 friends or less. What I've found over talking to lots of kids and seeing who's bullied and who's not, is that as people reach the 300 line, there's people that they don't know, which, number one, people become anonymous and they'll say things that they wouldn't say under normal circumstances.
True.
Number two, if you don't know them, you shouldn't have them online. It could be any kind of, you know, registered predator or anybody that's hunting your kid. As a parent, you need to make sure they know who's on their friends list. But 200 was a good number, and I know that when I started using that number, the bullying reports went way down.
That's fantastic.
And I would tell parents, hey, look, the first step, number one, let's get them down to 200 friends. Some parents didn't like that because they thought they were punishing that kid when they were my kid's being bullied and you want me to take away their friends? No, I want you to protect them from the world out there.
Well, and then you've got students like Delphia who understand that some of the applications out there, Snapchat, anonymous applications, you know, you talk about Ask FM, these applications that you may have never even heard of as parents, you choose not to be involved with. How do you see technology, even in schools, affecting the way kids communicate these days and how they're allowed to bully?
It definitely gives them, they think it's a sort of buffer, and the things they're exposed to on social media, the way they get used to technology at schools as we're using it now, they start to feel as if they have more freedom to put their own views in front of other people's views. And so I've seen on social media, I've seen people, first of all, before we had technology being restricted in schools, people would just walk in the halls and look down at their phones while walking, and they wouldn't talk to other people. And they would spend all their time trying to get their attention from people who weren't really with them. And I think that's really important, because what Officer said about how these kids have 5,000 friends, they start to crave attention from multiple people that aren't substantial in their life. And because of that, then more bullying comes. And because of that bullying, then they want more attention from other people who can't really give them the relationships and strength that they need. And so it becomes this vicious cycle of, oh, I need more of this, but I can't do that unless I'm like this. And that leads to aggressive conversations on Twitter, Snapchat, whatever social media you have. And also a broken down kind of esteem and standards you have within yourself.
I think that's so true. We've become the like generation, right? We want everyone to like us. Even us as adults want to do that. I want to bring in some of our Facebook viewers who are sending us comments and questions. We do encourage this because I want this panel to hear from you. Jamie writes that our problem isn't on social media as it is our school. Our first grade daughter has been physically and mentally abused by 2 boys, and the school acted like it's no big deal. Maybe a little hard to think about, but we get comments like this, Superintendent, all the time. How are you trying to get this message into the schools so that they know how to deal with it? Because it's a fine line.
It is, and I would like to say that I think we've evolved as a society to say we're no longer going to sweep this under the rug. I think in our generation we heard every excuse that there was growing up, such as, well, it's a rite of passage as a child, it happened to me, what's the big deal? But the one message I like to send to students is bullies like to keep you quiet. Isolation and control is the name of the game for them, and so make sure you keep talking, because that's the one thing they don't want you to do. If you've told your parent, then make sure that you're telling your counselor, make sure you're telling your school resource officer, make sure you're telling your principal, make sure you're telling your neighbor. Don't stay quiet. And for a parent, I would say document, document, document. And continue, for your child's safety as well, to continue to tell other people. I don't know any educator that gets up in the morning and says, today I think I shall make sure every child in my classroom is a victim of bullying.
Sure.
I think it's more about awareness and training, opportunities, and how to handle it. But I will say, since we've had conversations about, I don't care what the reason is, I don't care if you think it's a rite of passage, enough is enough. We want to eradicate bullying in our schools. Talk, 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 talk. There's power in numbers, and adults are the first line of defense to eradicate bullying in our schools.
So this comes in from Tiffany. I agree that social media plays a huge part in older kids, but what about younger children? Tiffany is saying that my daughter's in kindergarten. Is there a point where we need to be starting the conversation about bullying? Is kindergarten too young? Do they not get at that age? What have you found?
Well, we haven't done work in preschool or kindergarten. We start generally with 2nd graders or 3rd graders, but we modify the conversation for the younger students with K through 12. So maybe they're not ready to understand the concept of bullying in terms of the definition and all the different aspects of it, but kids understand what's okay and what's not okay when other kids cross the line and act out in ways that are hurtful to them. So I think that the message that we need to send, and that we send in our training to students, is that when you see that, there are things that you can do that help the student who's being bullied, that stops the situation. And there's simple interventions that we teach students, and then they use those strategies when they see those behaviors at school. So I think younger kids and older kids alike are able to intervene and understand those concepts.
And Dr. Midget, your work has been done basically, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but almost as like a peer tutor situation. So you have students who are taking action and seeing this happen. Is that the best policy? You know, is that the way to really stop bullying, is to make sure that students are recognizing it and seeing it and saying, hey, you know, whether it's Johnny or Ricky or Susie, they are the ones almost. But then you get this idea of tattletelling too,
Right.
you know. So how do you do that?
So our work focuses on what we call bystander intervention. So a bystander is somebody that witnesses a situation. So for example, bullying at school. So we teach students what to do when they see that. So there's 4 strategies that we teach them. We've developed this program that's called STACK. So S stands for stealing the show. So we have students just kind of do something maybe funny or, you know, intervene in the situation in a way that takes away the attention from the bully and from the target, and, you know, takes the audience away from witnessing the situation. And that's a strategy that's appropriate for some students that are pretty outgoing and comfortable in social settings. The second strategy we teach is called turning it over. So that's involving the adults at school. So we identify adults who are safe and who will help them report or will listen, will take action. So we often identify the SROs or the school counselor or the school principal. And we tell students that when they witness physical bullying or when they don't feel safe or when they see cyberbullying, that they immediately should turn it over.
Right, big red flags.
That's right.
So STA?
A is accompany others. So that is after the situation is over, the bystander can go up to the student who was targeted and say, hey, I saw what happened, and you know that's not okay. Do you want to go for a walk during recess, or do you want to play basketball with us? And we understand that for some students they don't want to talk about it. So just being there for that student that was targeted, so that they know that they're not alone, and that other people at school care about them, and that that what happened to them is not acceptable. And then the last strategy that we teach is coaching compassion. So that's when the bystander has a relationship with the student who bullies or is older than the student who bullies and believes that they'll be respected. So they can say to the student who bullied, hey, you know, I saw what you did and that's not cool. You know, that happened to me and it didn't feel good. So those are the strategies that we focus on teaching students.
Would it work, Officer Gomez? Would a STACK approach work when you start talking to 14 to 18-year-olds? Or do those skills need to be taught in the early years so that kids have the skills in order to be willing to stand up to a bully?
It's never too late to teach skills. I mean, that's why we go through high school anyways, and they're learning a lot. So we can try everything, and for some people it may be different. You know, that sounds like excellent tips to give kids, but we want to give them a list of options. You know, hey, maybe you're not comfortable doing this, so here's another option. Maybe you're not comfortable doing this much. Here's an option. You know, we have a tip hotline now at the schools where they can submit anonymous, completely anonymous. They put it on their phone and then they can submit it. It comes to the right school, and we have no idea who sent it to us, but that gives them an anonymous way to report bullying in any way, shape, or form.
Is that just done in the West Ada School District, or is that something
No,
you know?
that's actually Treasure Valley.
Okay.
And it's p3tips.com, and you can download that, and students can download that. Anybody can submit tips on bullying, on anything like that. But that does sound like an excellent thing to teach everybody. And like I said, it's never too late to teach these tips, and there's not going to be one way to stop it. We want to give as many options as we can.
That's why we're starting the conversation, right? Let me get a couple more people in here. Gina asks, we're hearing more about the interventions that Dr. Midget helps teach students. And this is going on right here in the Treasure Valley, correct? There's some schools you've been working with.
Right.
Who's had success?
Well, many schools have had success that we're working with. Actually, what we're finding in our research is that out of all of the students that we train, out of those that witness bullying, 100% of them are using a strategy. And we also find that compared to a control group, meaning students that aren't trained, those that use the strategies as bystanders have increased self-esteem and have a decrease in their level of anxiety. So,
All good.
right.
Superintendent Ibarra, I want to pause for a second, and I want to take a second to show a public service announcement that your office has decided to put out, because you have a way of, you want to make sure that the message is really getting out there. So let's take a moment, watch this PSA.
Bullying thrives when we do nothing. Students can create an environment where everyone feels safe.
When bystanders look the other way, bullying can have serious consequences, like depression, and it affects everyone.
If you see someone getting picked on, pushed around, or threatened, say something. We can make a positive change together. Don't be a bystander.
I'm Superintendent Ibarra, reminding everyone that adults are the first line of defense against bullies. Together, we can stop bullying and work to make every child in Idaho feel safe.
This comes out of a personal place for you. This isn't because, this topic, because you were elected to be the state superintendent of public instruction. Share with me a little bit about your personal story and then why you wanted to create that PSA and what you hope it will do.
Two personal stories. One is the Caldwell Mayor's Youth Group that I went to that really brought it to my attention that kids still do struggle with it at all age groups. We have done a lot. Like I said, I think over the years we've evolved, but it's still something that we need to keep talking about so that we can continue to eradicate bullying in our schools. Also, that personal conversation with the students is why I used children and students in the video, because we talked a lot about adult level interventions and policies, which are all great, but kids wanted to see something at their level that they could do to help. They wanted to see themselves involved in the process. So that's one personal piece of it. And the other personal piece of it that I share with students is I was a victim of bullying too at a young age. And I learned through that process that bullies, like I stated earlier, they operate on control. And controlling you to stay quiet, controlling you not to tell anybody is how they get their power and their respect from their peers. And when you make sure you bring that to someone's attention, that's when adults can step in and help you. And why children feel like they need to try to handle it themselves, I wanted to show them through that public service announcement that you have friends, that you need to tell somebody, that adults are here to help you, and get that conversation started and show students how they can get involved in that process. I think also, like I said, back when we were growing up, we didn't have all of these resources, or we didn't know about them like we do today. That bullying is a way to control the victim, keep them quiet. That's how they operate. So keeping it to yourself actually helps the bully continue to keep you as the victim. So make sure you tell your parents, make sure you tell your school resource officer, make sure you tell a teacher, make sure you tell a neighbor, make sure you tell a counselor, as many people as you can tell to draw attention to the situation. The other thing that I learned over the years is that the bully is actually a victim as well.
True.
And we often don't talk about that. And so when I think back on that personal incident that I dealt with and that young lady, she was a victim of her circumstances as well. And both victim and perpetrator are dealing with a lot, and it has lasting effects on both the victim and the perpetrator. So we need to make sure that we draw attention to all of those avenues and that we involve our kids in this process. So that is why you see the public service announcement that involves our students.
Well, it's not just the public service announcements. I mean, you walk into the Department of Education and there are pictures up, and you've really taken this on as a mission. And I want you to tell the story a little bit, Delphi, as when State Superintendent Sherry Ibarra came to the Caldwell Mayor's Youth Council, she told me personally that she had her eyes opened by all of you, because you said, hey, kids are being bullied over apps. And it's one of those things where we didn't grow up in that generation. Sometimes as parents, we don't even realize what's out there. Do you feel like parents get it?
I feel like there's an extent to which they do, but because times change and because the social group changes with every youth, there's a point where they disconnect. And the biggest way where adults can get to understand is doing exactly what Superintendent Ibarra did, talking to the youth. With my personal experience in bullying, I accredit my, I guess you could say, success, my overcoming it,
Sure.
to my parents speaking to me through it.
Because you didn't want to tell them at first. You and I had a very emotional conversation about your bullying incident where you were scared to tell them. You were, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but almost ashamed that it was happening to you.
Yeah, it was.
Same thing. And you can tell, I mean, every time we talk about this,
Yeah.
it's emotional. It happened a couple of years ago.
Wow, okay. I'm sorry. For
take a
everyone who's
pause.
watching this, I'm actually a really emotional person, so it gets kind of annoying that I cry. But I went through it in elementary school, and then I went through it again in high school and somewhat in middle school. And each and every time, I was ashamed that I was bullied because, like Superintendent Ibarra said, they took control of my emotions and made me feel like the reason why I was being bullied was because I was not good enough. But because of the strong support system I had at home, and this connects back to wondering when you can go to your, how you can speak to kids at a young age. This comes back to talking to parents and helping them understand how they can instill in their kids that essence of, I'm not going to accept bullying and I'm not going to accept myself being a bully. Because my parents talked to me and showed me that I was not everything I had been controlled to think I was. And they showed me that I should not ever stoop so low as to bring someone down to that feeling of despair. I was able to take those skills and continue practicing them. And that's where it came into the Caldwell Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, where I've been able to have an opportunity to reach out to kids and make sure they never have to be in those kind of situations. And then when Superintendent Ibarra came in and actually spoke to us and asked, what issues do we have in schools? It wasn't the disgusting school lunch. It wasn't, oh, I don't like this teacher and the way they teach. It was, we're still getting bullied and we're finding new ways to bring each other down. And we need to figure out a way to show everyone that everybody has the same feelings, maybe in different situations, at different tolerance levels, but everybody has this feels despair at some point for some reason. And you can either be the cause of that or you can be the person who takes that away.
I love that you share your story. And I mean, I think your tears just reveal how serious this topic is. And this is a woman who is going places. So we are getting a lot of comments over Facebook right now. We really appreciate all of you talking to us and talking back to us. Lots of comments right now, though, about how we just need to, quote, toughen our kids up. You know, if there's a bully out there, you just punch them back in the mouth. And I think a lot of times, again, a generational thing, we forget that these bullies aren't physically standing in front of people. Or Officer Gomez, I don't know the last time you broke up a guy just slamming somebody into a locker. So much of it is happening here and it can be anonymous. What about that? What about just toughen up? Make sure you know what your kid's doing. Have them fight back, you know. How do you go about dealing with those comments?
So there is something to that. When you get your child that comes home and they're in tears and they say, Mom, Dad, I'm being bullied, right? A parent, I want them to take just a few minutes and calm down, first of all.
Sure.
Right?
Good
Because
advice.
a lot of times their first reaction is, I'm going, lights and sirens to the school and I'm going to bully the school administration until my kid stops being bullied. Right? And that's the wrong way to go about it. I mean, first of all, in calm and collected manner, sit down with your kid. If your kid comes into my office, the first thing I'm going to ask them is, hey, we have two options here. I can show you how to fix this, or I can fix this for you. That should be the same thing a parent does. You have an opportunity there to educate your kid. So there is something to that, and each person should try and handle it themselves from their own side of things first. On social media, you can block, you can delete. Remember, you collected these friends who are now bullying you. You're logging in every day to be bullied. You have the option to delete them. You have the option to take your phone and put it in the drawer and bully's gone. And parents should probably exercise some of those things too, because I see a lot of bullying going on in the parents and they're showing the same thing to the kids. And today with just the politics, there's so much bullying going on. They're showing kids these things. And if you want your kid to grow up in an environment where bullying is not there, you have to start with yourself. Same thing with texting and driving. When I see parents dropping off their kids and they're texting, guess what your kids are going to do? So there is an opportunity there to teach your child, but as well as, hey, let's be there when they need it. Let's go through our checklist. Okay, did I try this? Did I try this? Same as calling a tow truck. When you have something wrong with your car, you don't want to automatically call the tow truck. you want to go through some things. Hey, did I put gas in the car? Do I have air in all my tires? You want to try the easy things first to try and help yourself out. And there's a lot of kids who don't know how to do all that, but we want them to get to that point. When you get an opportunity, my kid is being bullied, let's start with the simple things. Let's learn, because it's not going to be the last time. When they go to college, there's going to be bullies. When they grow to be adults, there's going to be bullies in politics, there's going to be bullies at work, there's going to be bullies in the lunch line at Subway. We're always going to have bullies, and it's good to teach them at a young age how to go through the initial checks first.
One of the questions coming in from Mary out there, Mary, we appreciate this, talking about why can't we hold parents accountable? Should there be something more with laws or legislation? She's talking about fines or community service, even saying making them volunteer at the suicide hotline. I that might be a big stretch, but I think what Mary is trying to get at is there enough being done, Superintendent Ibarra, when it comes to the legislature? Boise Representative Alana Rubel had bullying legislation passed in 2015. Is that giving your office the power to do what needs to be done? Or do we need to be doing more as adults from a legislative standpoint?
This is one of the conversations that I actually had with the students, was the adult level policies in place that we have to have. That piece of legislation that you referred to talks about graduated consequences for repeat offenders. But I think it also goes back to parental involvement. The incident that I referred to early on when we first started this conversation about as a parent, I had gotten a phone call one time regarding an incident with my child, and I appreciated the conversation. The mom took the time to call me up and say, hey, did you know this was going on? Actually, I didn't, and I can't do anything about it unless you involve me and we can actually have this two-way conversation. Although very uncomfortable, as a mom, you think your kids can do no wrong, right? Sure. And you want to be their protector. But hearing that from the other mother's standpoint and us being able to work it out as adults, and I said, well, this is what I'm going to do on my end, and she said, this is what I'm going to do on my end. I didn't deal with it again after that.
Wow.
And so I think that's a vital step that we skip often. We immediately go right to policy level, and we don't think, hey, I have an opportunity to have a conversation with this parent, parent to parent, and see what I can get worked out here. So I always encourage folks to do that. Now, you will come across somebody one of these days who doesn't want to have that conversation with you, but I really believe it's few and far between. As a formal principal in an elementary school, a junior high, I've dealt with high school kids. I was a 3rd grade teacher, an 8th grade teacher. 99% of the time, having a conversation with a parent really was effective. It was rare that I had to take it, or we had to take it even a step further. I'm not saying that we didn't have to go to more graduated consequences, but I think it goes back to also, are these things effective? And are parents sitting up and take notice? Yes, because I go by the report. Because of that piece of legislation, we're required to report incidences that are severe, that required a consequence attached to a bullying incident, 1%. And so even though our At Youth Risk Survey reported 28% of our students had been involved at some point in a bullying incident, only 1% was being reported that actually had to take action. So in my view, these conversations are working. We still have work to do. We certainly don't want to ignore it. We certainly don't want to brush it under the rug and act like it's a done deal, we're finished, because we're not there yet. But we're working on it, and what I'm seeing is all of these approaches that we're talking about right here, like the officer said, there's no right or wrong way to approach it. We want to make sure we give our parents and our students every opportunity and a list of ways to deal with every incident.
Dr. Midget, when you're discussing the stack idea, and if you're just joining us here live on Facebook, this is going to remain on Facebook for you and on 6onyourside.com. You want to go back and listen to what Dr. Midget's doing with her research with this stack philosophy, which, if I can summarize it for you, basically is empowering children, the bystanders, to make sure that they're standing up and make sure that the victims of bullies are no longer victims. When it comes to dealing with parents, and you're looking at this kind of curriculum that you're trying to teach students, what are the biggest questions that parents have? Where are they seem to be floundering in this?
So in our work, we don't we haven't worked with parents quite yet. But in working with students and doing qualitative research with older students, what they tell us is that they perceive that the adults in their life, often teachers and sometimes parents, don't understand what they're going through in terms of cyberbullying. And they also talk about bullying in general being minimized or normalized as, you know, just toughen up and this is okay and, you know, you're overreacting. And the message that they share with us is that from their perspective, it hurts more than what the adults perceive. So something that we talk about as a research team is developing a teacher training model to equip them with simple strategies on what to do when a student comes to you and tells you about bullying. Because we also understand that teachers are busy, and if they stopped to address every time each student had a problem, they probably wouldn't have time to do much else during their day. But there is a need for teachers to learn how to intervene, not just teachers, but all adults at school.
And State Superintendent Ibarra, you talk about that 1% that has so far come in when it takes a consequence for a bully to then be reported to your offices, that I think that reporting is good. Officer Gomez, 1%, that seems like such a little number when we're talking about such a huge topic that seems to affect so many kids. Is that legitimate in your mind, a 1%? Is that maybe it focuses on bullying being that serious?
So, you know, speaking of consequences first, there is a state law that says you cannot bully, you know, repeated harassment. I have a citation I can write a kid. It's $72. Okay? Usually the parents end up paying that. I've only written maybe 4 of those in my career, and I probably deal with more bullying than most people do. Most situations can be solved with a conversation. And if parents call each other and talk to each other, it can be solved like that. And then if we go through the proper steps at the schools have excellent processes in place. A lot of times the parents, they expect us to take the 8-year-old to jail right away, and you guys aren't doing anything. Well, we are. We have the process in place. Or they come straight to me. Why won't you do anything? Well, we're at school. We want to go through the process. Let's let, first of all, parent to parent, then parent to school, then parent to police, right? There's a hierarchy. And by going to the school, you get it documented. That way we can see if there's an ongoing problem, even if it's with a second student. But the percentage of kids that we can't help, very, very, very small. Yeah, 3 or 4 citations ever out of the many bullying things. And then the biggest thing is we're improperly using the bullying word because it's social conflict. And usually you have the Twitter fights.
Right, and that's the big definition here. What is bullying?
The first parent to call me thinks their kid is the victim. And in some cases, I have all the parents involved call me, and they want me to arrest all the other kids. And that's not going to happen. One of the best things a parent once told me when I told them their daughter was involved in a Twitter fight and not being bullied, she called me back a little while later and she said, in my house, the #1 rule when we gave them a social media device was, you will never post anything negative about anybody in a public environment. It was that simple, and I think they took away her phone for another year. They said she's not of age enough to use this. In another year, we'll give her another chance. That was a beautiful solution, and what a beautiful rule to have in your house. In our house, we won't say anything negative about anybody for any reason.
Or, Delphia, you just get off those sites too, right? I mean, you know, I think today's day and age where, I mean, you've literally got 8 and 9-year-olds who now have cell phones in their back pocket, not usually, but sometimes, and you wonder if you don't get the pushback, though, from teenagers like, this is my life, you know, all my friends are right here, I have to be here. You know, how do you do it as a teen? How do you say, no, I'm not going to do that? I mean, obviously, you are doing just fine in your life.
Well, it's definitely hard. I'm not going to lie. I'm not the perfect teenager who's like, oh, I'll keep it to 200 friends, or, hey.
Uh-oh, Officer Gomez.
But I have it, and this is where it's very important to realize that adults need to be involved. Parents, your grandparents, whoever is your adult figure in your life that is responsible and you can trust, you have to be able to learn to talk to them. And adults, you have to do the same thing. Learn how to talk to your children, because that is important. So for me, with my social media, there's so much good you can get from it. There are so many good people, like good real life friends you can connect to, good communities you can connect to that share your interests and your positivity goals and wants. But you have to make sure that you know where your standards are. Hey, if this page is in danger and I'm seeing these people comment on here, all these fights and offensive things, and it's getting nasty, then why be on there? If this page is good and has the positivity that you need in your life, then why not choose that one instead? Definitely blocking is a tool that was made for a reason, and it works because I've used it. Reporting as well. Reporting at school, you can do that on social media. I have used that multiple times too, because people comment the worst things. I had a friend who an Instagram page was made, I hate Megan Pope, I hate her, kill her, and it was terrible. She was in tears. She was messaging me and in tears and showing me even text messages. She could not find out who it was. This person was using another number and saying, kill yourself. I made this page, kill yourself. And that's where it comes into play. Immediately, when all her friends, her real friends on social media saw that, we went on there, we reported the page, we told her to block it, and another one was made again. We went on there, we reported that page, we told her to block it. It happens on Facebook, it happens on Instagram, and Snapchat is a little different, but I know people get sent things from people, and it's any kind of harassment, and it's not acceptable. What you have to do, you have to learn to control yourself and say, this is not a positive influence in my life. Define it for yourself so you can have the courage to let it go. Because it is hard. It really is.
No, it is hard. I mean, we all like our social media, don't we? I mean, let's face it, as parents, we like it. Steve has an interesting question. I think this goes back to kind of what Officer Gomez was talking about. Steve asks, if my kid does fight back, and I don't know exactly, Steve, what you're talking about. You can Facebook us again. Physically fight back. What are the consequences for them? I mean, in today's day and age, you know, what happens if you end up in a fight? I assume there are consequences.
So at our schools, each situation is going to be taken individually, right? We don't have just a blanket statement that we're going to make for everybody. There are going to be consequences for fighting. However, we've had the case where somebody's bullied, and they just lose it and punch somebody in the nose. And then when we get to the bottom of it, you know, hey, you can't just punch somebody in the nose, but at the same time, we understand, let's get you some help, right? There's no, you can, very few times have I seen where you can't walk away, right? I mean, even as a police officer, we deal with that. You know, your attitude with anybody you're dealing with has just as much to do with it as their attitude does, right? And how you handle yourself. And these are great lessons to learn for the rest of your life. And I always tell the kids, hey, don't let somebody control your emotions. That's hard to do as a kid.
Right? Are you kidding me? With all the hormones that are going on in this age group that we're talking about and what they're trying to figure out in life, that's of course why we have so much social conflict that has to get through. And I'm talking obviously about middle school and teenagers mostly. This is interesting too. Unfortunately, Sasha's saying it seems like there's not a across-the-board fix to this situation. And maybe we're talking about that here a little bit with, you know, there's not, if somebody hits somebody at school, it's not, this is the punishment. Does it need to be an across-the-board for school districts, Superintendent Ibarra? Does there need to be something laid out specifically saying X, Y, and Z do this? And why is that happening or why is that not happening?
Policies in place, legislation in place, we definitely need. Those are guidelines, but they simply are that. Every situation is different, and we deal with every age group. We deal with kindergartners all the way up to grown adults that are still 18, 19 years old in high school. So it depends. It depends on the law. It depends on the policy. We do have to look at every situation. There isn't a blanket approach. But I also want to say, as a formal principal of a junior high and of an elementary school, I can speak to both of those approaches. What I did at the elementary school was a completely different approach of what I did at the junior high or the high school level, simply because of what you stated earlier, emotional intelligence.
Sure.
You have to learn how to deal with your emotions. And one of the things I did as an elementary principal was a culture of respect and empathy. We started early in kindergarten focusing on what does that look like for children. They may not, like the doctor said earlier, they may not understand the concept of bullying, but they certainly understand the concept of respect and empathy and how we treat others. So I think those are the areas that we have learned to focus on as well. What does it look like to have empathy for your classmates? What does it look like to have respect for someone else? What does it look like you said earlier, to make someone else feel good? I want to be remembered for helping somebody, not hurting them or victimizing them. I think it was a statement that we all probably need to remember that came to my mind that you stated earlier was, I won't remember what you bought me and I won't remember what you did for me, but I will certainly remember how you made me feel. And that is a culture we want to teach our children from a young age. But dealing with those different age groups, that's the reason why I don't think a blanket approach to that is ever going to be effective. But policies, legislation, rules in place, absolutely.
And Dr. Midget, let me take a moment. I want you to comment to that, but we've hit the 3 o'clock hour, and I know that a lot of people are just kind of jumping online, joining us on Facebook. We are live on Facebook with Making the Grade, Stop Bullying. A wonderful panel here of experts who have lived through bullying themselves, have done research on it, who are policy makers, and who live it every day with teenagers. And we want your comments and questions to come in over the next 15 minutes or so that we know what you're thinking, what you want to know about, your last questions to these panelists. But Dr. Midget, I wanted to say, going off what Superintendent Ibarra was talking about, you say that you start your research, and it typically starts with second, third graders. Where do you see changes in children emotionally with where they have to address bullying in different ways? I want to give parents some clues out there to say, okay, you know, when your kid hits X grade, maybe you need to take it to this level.
Okay. Well, I think that in our experience, the little ones to the older ones are dealing with bullying, but what the literature says is that bullying escalates as children are ready to transition into middle school or junior high school, and they're changing into a different building, and they're reestablishing their social hierarchy, and they have an opportunity to rise to the top. And that at that point in time in their development, being physically strong or being popular is important, and that aggressive behavior is viewed more positively at that age than at any other age during child development. So, you know, as children reach older elementary school, 5th, 6th grade, that's an important time to be aware.
Should there be a blanket policy for school districts to follow, or what have you found in your research?
I mean, I have to agree with what Superintendent has said, that it depends on the developmental level of children and the school and, what's required in that community. So there's a lot of factors that go into effectively dealing with bullying. And in the literature, that's recognized that bullying is a difficult phenomena to reduce, so it's complicated.
So we're getting comments and questions in. Jan is saying kids need to learn respect early in the home. Amanda says that my child had an issue with another child in 2 classes. This was actually at South Junior High. It was handled beautifully by taking her out of the classroom. Deanna says that my 5th grader was bullied and was treated no different than the offender. No one contacted me. Joe says, I was bullied growing up and it made me stronger, taught me to stand up for myself and not let others fight my battles for me. Thoughts about what people are saying about bullying?
Is it okay if I start?
Sure.
So that's something that's been on my mind the last comment. I learned that other people shouldn't fight my battles for me. That is true. In my case, yes, bullying tore me down, but because of the support group I had from the adults in my life and also from Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, that's where I was able to rise and learn how to fight my own battles. And it wasn't necessarily a fight. I did not punch anybody, but I gained a strength within myself to realize, okay, this is how I react emotionally, this is how it hurts me, but what can I do to fix myself? Who can I reach out to fix myself? And so, yes, parents, a big thing. I've seen a lot when parents hear their child is being hurt and they get aggressive and they get involved with the offender, with the bullier. Bully, sorry, excuse my English, with the bully, and it becomes a mess. You need to understand where you go to connect. Like Superintendent Ibarra said, she connected with the other parent, she connected with the school, and that's how they did their work. You need to learn how to teach your children what respect is, what empathy is at a young age, and you have to instill that within yourself. From my personal experience, that's how it has worked. Of course, it's different with everyone else.
Anybody else? Comments as they're coming in? Holly says, my school has older grades help as buddies for the younger children, especially with special needs. I think that's a great idea. We'd love to hear your thoughts, what's happening in your schools, what works really well. Superintendent Ibarra, have you had any instances where you've just thought, hey, that's a gold star school when it comes to bullying? Have any programs or initiatives worked that you just love? And I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot there, so if you need to think about it.
Actually, listening to all your comments, it actually backs up what we were talking about earlier, is each individual has dealt with that. It's affected them differently. So a blanket policy, guidelines, yes, but a blanket policy would be really difficult to nail down. But to answer your question about what I've seen, I actually saw a young lady in Lewiston who created an app. And instead of talking about the app that people are using to bully each other, it was an app that she created based on what kind of behaviors we want our students to display, modeling good behavior, like the doctor said earlier, starting earlier, like I said earlier, in the elementary school that I was the principal in. So I know that students, it's getting down to the student level because that student has created a game and an app that you can actually give comments to your peers and participate in. Good behavior and modeling empathy and respect for each other. So that would be a gold star right now. But I love the comment that they have buddies, older buddies.
Yes.
There's lots of great things that are going on in our schools. There's a lot of training happening. A lot of school districts actually require training around that topic, around the bullying topic. So.
Sarah's saying that they actually had we had bullying on camera at Lake Hazel. Nobody helped, so they had to pull their student out of line and do online school. That just seems unfortunate to me that at times we get to that point. Does that just mean that the conversations have not happened within our schools? Because Officer Gomez, it certainly seems as though what you're saying, what you've seen, is that people are willing to listen to this issue inside the schools.
Absolutely, we are. You know, and sometimes there's just some miscommunication or some misunderstanding between who's reporting it and who's taking it. And sometimes the parents don't see the part their own child plays in it. And there's no way I could know,
sure,
each individual person. But a lot of times parents are biased to their own kids. You know, that's how some kids make it through their life, is with their parents' bias. They don't see how their kid participates in it, right? The biggest problem I always see is the kids who do have 4,000 and 5,000 friends, right? There's some other issues going on usually in the home to cause them to do that. And then a lot of times, the people who get bullied the most are usually the biggest bullies themselves, right? And some of that comes from home, some of that comes from their environment. And the other thing we have to take into account is that, especially the young kids, they're just learning how to get along with other kids. And if you grow up in a household with 5 brothers and sisters, what your term for bullying is going to be way different than the single child household, right? Somebody who grows up with no brothers and sisters never has any physical contact. So when somebody comes and slaps the basketball away, I just got bullied. I can't believe it.
Right. It's kind of what we talked about earlier on in this Facebook Live forum, is that there's a tolerance level there. And so to have blanket statements, or you can't necessarily do that, which is, it's difficult. Everyone would like, I think, to be able to say, that's bullying, that's not. But it just doesn't seem to be working that way. Here's one more comment. Amy says, there are children that just allow to continue on because they don't want to get into trouble or feel like a tattletale. And that's the silence part of bullying. So when you talk about, Dr. Midget, your stack approach, it certainly seems like what I'm gathering from all of you is that it has to be talked about, not only in forums with adults, but you have to give children the empowerment and the words to see what's going on around them and to do something about it, if so be.
Right. And what the research says is that the majority of students, they see bullying and they feel like it's wrong and they don't know what to do. So they step away and then they feel guilty. So it's really important to equip them with strategies that they can use so that they can intervene and support each other.
This conversation is excellent, and we could go on for hours and hours and hours. But this conversation has started right here. today, and we're going to continue it because we are committed to it here at 6 on Your Side. As we're beginning to wrap up here, and please continue to give your comments and questions. We've got our 6 on Your Side team watching our Facebook page. We'll be responding to you, replaying much of this during our newscast. I'd love to give each of you a moment as we're wrapping up to just give a last comment or a last thought, whether that be an encouraging word to other students, to educators, to parents. What needs to be done to stop bullying in your mind? Dr. Midget, you want to start and see what is it that we need to do as a society?
Mm-hmm. Well, in our experience, what we've found is that students do want to intervene, that they recognize that bullying is not okay, and they want to know how to support others and how to stop it from happening at schools. So in my opinion, what needs to happen is that we need to train students to intervene when they witness bullying at school.
How could people find out more about your research?
Well, my research is published in scholarly journals in our field. Some of them are available online, but I think the best way would probably be to look at my web page at Boise State and have information there on how to find out more about the STACK strategies.
Officer Gomez, what are your final thoughts?
So because most bullying is done online, here's some online tips. Number one, we talked about earlier, 200 friends or less on any given social media. Make sure their accounts are private, not that they're not opened up to the whole world. Another super important one that we haven't talked about, a lot of parents let their kids on social media before they're supposed to. For example, Facebook requires you to be 13. However, I would say a great percentage of kids are on Facebook at 9, 10, 11, 12. And those age restrictions are there for very good reasons. Number one is for bullying. Number two is for, to keep predators away from them. And the list goes on as to why those age limitations are there. But I know I've gone into 6th grade classes, raise your hand if you have social media. About 60% of them have their own phones with social media. 5th graders and 4th graders already have Facebook pages, already have Twitter accounts. And that should not be acceptable. Talk to your kids. Not just when they have a problem, talk to them always. Talk to them about what's going on. Build up some self-worth in them, right? Easy way to build up self-worth, get their homework done. Right? That's an easy way to build up their self-worth. That makes them go to school. They feel good about themselves. They feel good about their future. As soon as you get behind in homework, now you go to school, you feel like you're behind. You feel like you're an outcast. Now anything anybody says to you, you're at a heightened sensitivity. So just easy things to do. Easy things. 200, make sure they're of age to be on there. Build up their self-worth. Homework's an easy way to do that, and let's get them going on the right path.
Those are some great tips, and coming up tonight at 10 o'clock on 6 on Your Side, I go inside an internet safety class that Officer Gomez teaches. It will blow your mind, parents. I learned, I thought I was pretty knowledgeable on the topic, and he blew my mind. So join us tonight at 10 o'clock for that. Delphia, last thoughts or comments, especially to students out there?
We've discussed here how bullying definitely is a puzzle that shifts for everyone. But one thing I do know for students and victims, which, as we've said, can be the bullies themselves, is that you have a support group that can help you rise above that, whether that be your parents or another outside group in the community or in your school. Sometimes you just need to pick yourself up and reach out for them. Also, to those people who know they can be a support group to someone else, look for them, search for them. Do not be afraid to smile at anybody in the hallways, because that could save a life.
It's beautiful. Superintendent of Public Instruction, Sherry Ibarra, you have led the charge on this for the last couple of years, and I know you've got stuff moving forward. What's your message to educators, and how do we stop bullying?
I think the one thing that I would say as a mom and also as a state superintendent of public instruction, that we all want excellent schools, but we can't have excellent schools if students don't feel safe. So again, we are, as adults, the first line of defense against bullies, and so talk about it. Talk, 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 and don't stop. If you don't get your answer at the first level, go to the next level. Write it down. Tell a parent, tell a counselor, tell a principal, tell a teacher, tell a resource officer, tell a friend. Use your social media to get your message out there, just the way the bully is using their message to silence you. So
Well, I am looking forward to seeing where this conversation leads and how we can stop bullying. And this live Facebook forum will remain here on the 6 on Your Side Facebook page. We're also posting it to 6onyourside.com. We hope that it is a valuable resource for students, for parents, for educators. And then, as we said, coming up tonight at 6 o'clock or at 10 o'clock on 6 on Your Side, we're going to dive deeper into how parents can protect their children. I'm taking you into Officer Gomez's internet safety class, and we're also going to look at a middle school that is taking on bullies in a whole new way. That's tonight at 10 o'clock on 6 on Your Side. All of you, it has been a delight, and I do hope that these conversations keep going, not only in your own individual fields and specialties, but that we can keep it going right here online as well and make a difference. Thank you all for joining us for this special live Making the Grade on Facebook. Keep the conversation going, because together we can stop bullying.